We might not be at war here at home, but right now South Africa's skies stand unprotected because News 24's exclusively revealed that our Air Force pilots today can only take off in just 6 military aircraft. Yeah, just 6. That's 2 fighter jets, a helicopter, and 3 fighter jet trainers. Next, we discuss our defenseless defense force with senior investigative journalist Sikonathi Mantshantsha.
At the rate we are going, we would need years and years of preparation to actually engage if Zimbabwe decided to attack us on air.
Later in the show, the South African aviation fraternity is honouring hero pilot James O'Connell following the West Coast airshow crash. And Donald's not the only Trump who's into golfing. In fact, one of them's bagged a tiger. My name's Graeme Raubenheimer. Let's chat all this and more right here on The Lead on News 24. The Defence Force is digging deep these days to remain afloat and in the air. The state of the Air Force in particular has just gotten worse and serves little more than a pickup service currently for the President. Our man on this story is senior investigative journalist Sikonathi Mantshantsha, and he joins us now from our Johannesburg studios. Sikonathi, a very good day to you.
Greetings to you, Graeme, and greetings to our readers.
Thanks so much for joining us on The Lead here on News 24. Okay, so we recall now in 2023, just following the worst of the pandemic, Sikonathi, that according to the Defence Minister at the time, of course it was Thandi Modise, that around 283 South African Air Force aircraft were grounded specifically due to a lack of spares in those particular numbers. Has that situation improved at all?
Graeme, the starting point is that we must tell the listeners and indeed the readers that response was provided by Thandi Modise in October 2023 to a question asked in Parliament by the Democratic Alliance. And that is the only instance where any information has been publicly released about the fleet of the Air Force or about the state of the such detailed information about the state of our armed forces and combat readiness. To come back to your question, no, that has not changed, at least in a positive way. In fact, it has deteriorated, like we state in our article. A lot of those aircraft that Thandi Modise said were still up and running at the time have since been grounded to the only 6 currently running that we do have. Others have been on very long unavailability because for a very long time, for more than 10, 15 years, there's not been any equipment or spares to repair these state-of-the-art fighter jets, the trainers, and indeed helicopters, or even our old utility airplanes such as the Hercules C-130, which is a transport aircraft that can airlift troops over medium to long distances like 4,000 kilometers. We don't have any logistics capacity in the Air Force. There really is no fighting capacity left. As we state in the story, there's only 2 Gripen fighter jets that at a moment's notice could be scrambled to do the job for which they were acquired about 25 years ago.
Oh, of course, and if our readers would like to read more about this particular story, it's good to just say at this point that it's entitled Defenseless, Only 6 of 330 SA Air Force aircraft in working order. And of course, that's been trending on our front page on News 24. Sikonathi, golden question here in terms of updating what became public knowledge, of course, within the National Assembly. How did you source the latest information as per this piece? I understand you spoke to some anonymous expert here, some on the record and some that did not want to be identified. Is that right?
Absolutely, Graeme. So because people have relationships, one with the National Defence Force itself as an institution, and due to their contractual obligations or even statutory requirements, they couldn't come on the record with their names and identify the organizations for which they work. But they spoke to me, and I spoke in particular to people that are in touch daily with our troops, both here in South Africa and in the DRC, where people, for example, if people who receive complaints and lodge such grievances with the management of the force and such things, and I have spoken to people in organizations whose job it is to help keep our hardware, in this case the aircraft, working, like people whose job it is to service or even buy the parts, make sure that if the Air Force needs equipment for a rifle, for example, they will provide that equipment. I'm deliberately being vague about who exactly those are, because I'm trying to not identify them, which is the condition on which they spoke to me. I also spoke on the record to Cobus Murray, who for about 20 years was the Democratic Alliance's representative in Parliament on the defense matters, and he was Shadow Minister for Defense, and he actually is the person that extracted that information which formed the backbone of our article from Thandi Modise, and he had asked specific questions and listed this type of aircraft, how many are working, and that type of aircraft, how many are working. Then I used that information, combined it with people on the field to say, when last did this one fly? But most importantly, once I had all of that information and I put it together, 3 weeks ago, I went to the National Defence Force itself and say, please give me a list of each of these items. How many are working? When last did they work? And where were they when we needed them in the DRC? Specifically, the Royfalk helicopter, the Oryx helicopter. Royfalk is the assault helicopter, which can help repel enemy aircraft, or even bomb their positions from long distances of about 20 kilometers, which provides air cover for our forces. And then the Oryx helicopter is, call it an air ambulance. It can fly in and pick up wounded people and fly about 2 to 3 hours to drop them off at a safe location. Or it could easily be used to go drop off troops when they are required, avoiding land transportation, which in itself was in short supply. So that's how we went about gathering the information. We gave the South African National Defence Force, we begged them, I'm using that term deliberately, we begged them over a period of 3 weeks to provide some sort of response. And they kept insisting, we're not going to tell you anything other than that, you know that our Air Force is really in bad shape.
And Sikonathi, I thought quite illuminating, as per your article, you also point out that the SANDF communications teams were using basically Gmail and Yahoo email accounts here, which would then signal in itself a bit of a lack of, I would say, two-factor security and all of those sorts of things. Yet they cited, obviously, some of the reasons why they could not confirm some of your findings due to security reasons in themselves. The irony.
Yeah. Graeme, it would be laughable if it was not so tragic for South Africa. The fact that the National Defence Force appears not only unable to do its job of defending the country, making sure that its troops are well equipped and well protected, but it cannot even run a website or a safe communication system using Gmail and using Yahoo, because their own servers in the Defence Force are not where they should be. I'm aware that they were actually hacked about 2 years ago, and a lot of that information is sitting elsewhere. So they are not only unable to run the Air Force, maintain equipment, but they are also unable to run their own website, their own communication, civilian communication infrastructure, such as emails. So you have a lot of, if you go to the Defence Force website or to the Department of Defence website, you find a lot of people communicating official business, which should be secure, using American companies that Sikonathi and yourself can just do on a daily basis. A lot is wrong with our armed forces, and if you needed to see what that is, basic things such as, does the South African National Defence Force have its own email system? The answer is it does not.
Sure. Of course, during the darkest days of apartheid, what some scholars call high apartheid era, South Africa, under the apartheid regime, had decided to become self-reliant on creating its own arms because of the United Nations arms embargoes of the time. Although there's arguments as to whether or not those were effective or not, but still South Africa had produced a lot of its own military equipment and military aircraft, thus specifically the Roy Falk as well as the Oryx, built and designed by Denel. Yet, as we speak, and as per your findings, Sikonathi, there are no Roy Falke in the air at the moment, and as we understand it, only one Oryx helicopter. I myself, as a journalist, I've been lucky to be in one Oryx helicopter at Easterplaat Air Force Base about just more than a decade ago, and that was for a media sort of campaign at the time. But as we speak, there are fears that the Oryx will soon follow the Roy Falke as being not able to take off.
Graeme, for everything that was wrong with apartheid and the defense industry at that time, it created the best military on the African continent. And the backbone of that military was the Air Force, which produced the Roy Falk, amongst others, and the Oryx. Before that, there were Impala and Starflyer and all those jets. Because of the situation, to survive, apartheid had to build its own industry, and that's how Denel, which today Denel, was created, and it fulfilled that role with quite admirable efficiency. Now, what we have seen is that this current government or successive governments since democracy, where the South African National Defence Force has now been transformed from a belligerent force which destabilized all the neighboring countries and attacked everybody that was supporting the liberation parties. It had to find its new mission as a peacekeeping force on the African continent, and hopefully it could be used in international conflicts to help keep the peace or enforce the peace. It has now lost all that capability due to strategic mistakes, such as deciding that we're not going to give it enough budget to train our forces, to keep our equipment in order, because we don't need to spend so much money on the military, whereas we have public services that we need to provide, such as hospitals and education and social grants payment and stuff like that. Except those two have been destroyed. Now you have a situation where the best military on the African continent, and I repeat again, the best air force on the African continent has been degraded to such an extent that it cannot scramble two jets at a time if we had to intercept anything at a moment's notice. At the rate we are going, we would need years and years of preparation to actually engage if Zimbabwe decided to attack us on air. So you only have, as we said in that article, that we only have one Oryx helicopter that has just been returned to service around the 20th of February, out of a fleet of 39 Oryx aircraft that could be flying and helping our personnel, our soldiers, our pilots fit and current in terms of their flying hours. That is now gone. You're running a risk where you are about to lose such capacity, if you have not already lost it, that was and skill that was displayed, for example, which swelled the pride of the nation during the floods in Mozambique in 2000. You have had many instances where the Air Force has been called out to come and do civilian help in non-conflict situations, to save lives, to build bridges, to the whole army in general. That is all gone, not because we no longer have the skill, but the priorities of the government are actually directed elsewhere. And of course, Graeme, not everything, if you've been in South Africa the last 30 years, not everything is incidental. The fact that the Air Force cannot lift any of its troops or equipment without procuring services from private service providers in itself is not incidental. There are always people benefiting one way or another, including within the military itself. So we have a really big way to go to at least salvage what we can out of the Air Force and make it a militarily relevant fighting force again. But that will need decades at the rate that it is going.
And I wanted to hone in very quickly, Sikonathi, on the arms deal, because the arms deal, of course, we don't have enough time to get into everything regarding the arms deal. But, the 1999 deal saw us as a government buy several Gripen aircraft, and we brought those on board. My question to you, how many of the aircraft that we had acquired at the time are currently in operation? I can't imagine many, because we only have 6, right?
Graeme, for our younger readers, let's just give them just a bit of context.
Go for it.
After the democratic election in 1994, which reset South Africa from a conflict zone into a human rights-based parliamentary democracy, the new government decided, by the way, the new government were the guerrillas of the previous generations. They decided, all right, we now need to rearm and equip the South African National Defence Force with a new mission and new equipment for a new world, a world in which it no longer just attacks its neighbors willy-nilly. So there was, at that time, about 9 billion rands worth of money that bought helicopters, that bought fighter jets, that bought trainer fighter jets to train the pilots, that bought Navy assets such as ships, submarines, destroyers and stuff. That was the biggest procurement program that South Africa entered into. Amongst those, it bought 24 British Aerospace Hawk jet trainers to train pilots to fight in attack helicopters, 24 of those. And it bought 26 fighter helicopters. Those were the Gripens. Today, we only have 2 Gripens working, and the others have not been working for about 10 years. We only have 3 Hawk trainers, the fighter jets, to train those pilots. Only 3 out of 24 that were acquired. We acquired about 20 Augusta helicopters, which were to be used. Utility helicopters. If, for example, someone or a ship was stricken at sea, the Air Force could come in and rescue the crew. Or our Navy was patrolling in the seas, and there's something that needs attention. We always had the backup of to airlift people out of dangerous zones deep at sea, using the Augusta helicopters. All of those have been grounded. So basically, and of course, we will do soon another article on all the elements of the armed forces, the Navy and the Army, to show how good or bad a shape the Navy is in. And we will focus again primarily on what assets were bought during 1999, 25 years ago. What is still serviceable today? Is our Navy still able to do the job that it must do to protect our maritime space, the South Africa's oceans, so to speak? Are we able to actually defend or even detect what's going on in the seas? That's where we are with the whole military in South Africa. Nothing is working. Certainly from those that were acquired 25 years ago, of course, there's a lot of evidence out in Parliament and in the commissions that made allegations of bribes that were paid to buy all of these equipment, and in the process ignored Denel, which was producing the Roy Falke, instead of the Air Force being equipped with more of the Rooivalk to create not only just opportunities, but to use this indigenous scientific knowledge and engineering skill that is homegrown. But we ignored that and went to buy helicopters in other countries, and that really limited our Denel's ability to provide the aircraft to sell them to anyone, and in the process killed the pipeline to produce equipment and spares, and of course killed the job opportunities that could have been created in manufacturing at really tertiary level, scientific level, and so that's all gone.
Sure, Sikonathi, and of course you've alluded to in your article how the lack of the capability of the operations of the Air Force at the moment affects the ecology of the Defence Force when it comes to the Navy. The Navy doesn't have that air support at the moment, and yes, it does affect our ability to patrol our coastlines. Of course, we know that piracy has been an issue stretching up in the regions of Somalia, etc., and we've been called upon in the past to assist there, but yet, a year goes by. Every year we hear about the reports of Navy vessels in dry dock in Simonstown, etc. So I'm really looking forward to what you're going to be unearthing there. Quickly moving into the Eastern DRC, and we recently had word, of course, at the height of that combat arena, we heard from Defence Minister, our current one, Andrew Motshekga, telling parliamentarians at the time that the South African forces indeed had enough military equipment in the DRC. But you've actually, in your piece, found evidence contrary, disputing what the minister had told fellow MPs.
Absolutely. Graeme, at least three people who, one, are in touch in the relationships I've spoken about, who are in touch with our combat troops in the DRC, have said to me that we initially, and this was again public information, South Africa had deployed 3 Rooivalk attack helicopters to the DRC to help provide air cover. It had also provided 4 Oryx helicopters, which you can call them ambulances when the situation requires it. They would again go drop troops when the situation required it, drop off troops where they are required. All of those had not been working for at least 2 years, meaning South Africa only had land forces there. The army did not have the Air Force. If anything required the backup of the Air Force or the Air Force to go in first and destabilize the enemy, it didn't have that capability. It relied on the Congolese Air Force. Now, I'm not going to make statements about the Congolese Air Force because I have not worked on that, but it generally there is not much to look up to there. In the event that the Congolese Air Force had any capacity at all to engage the enemy, who do you think they would prioritize in protecting their own armed forces or South African Defence Force? Be that as it may, 2 aircraft were lying in Goma Airport up until December 2022, and they were airlifted to South Africa by a foreign chartered Ilyushin cargo jet for repairs, and those are still at Denel because Denel is waiting for the Air Force to pay for them, to pay for the spares. So there were no Rooivalk at all operational. There was no aircraft the commanders could call upon when its troops go under attack. Also, there were no Oryx helicopters to airlift wounded soldiers out of battle zones or fresh supplies into the battle zone. There was no such things. So the guys who were now surrounded at their bases in Goma and in Sake had absolutely nothing other than what equipment they had with them to fight back with. And as we know, the tragic result is that 14 of our servicemen and women died in combat. I say, as a direct a result of the lack of equipment, and that is contrary to what the current defense minister says.
Really, to my mind, clipped wings. It's a really sad state of our South African Air Force at the moment. There's really where else to put it at this stage, Sikonathi. Just to end off, out of all of this, which I find an even bigger irony, is that the president himself is being delayed to meetings, to the budget meetings, because the Inkwazi presidential jet is also being grounded out of all of this. So not even if you thought that perhaps the elite in our government would be able to get to A to B, not even the president is getting around because of the failures of the Air Force right at this time.
Graeme, at the best of time, even the best amongst organizations, the really best, will have some logistical problems here and there. So the Air Force, in particular the VIP squadron, which transports the president and deputy and a few other people, is also susceptible to these. So there will be short-term logistical problems, such as when the Inkwazi was grounded due to a cracked windscreen. That would take several days to fix. So no big deal there. But the big deal is that jet, which is the official presidential jet, Boeing business jet. It's a business jet, militarily irrelevant, totally militarily irrelevant, was grounded during November by the Civil Aviation Authority. Guess for what? The jet was acquired in 2002, but paperwork was incomplete. And the Civil Aviation Authority in 2024, in November, said this jet is not going to fly until this particular paperwork is in order. But you also have an Air Force that has been reduced to an irrelevant military force, in that it now also provides erratic jet service to the first citizen of the republic, to the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. He cannot rely on the Air Force to do business, government business. Go back to something that not many people look or notice. When the commander-in-chief was inaugurated, President Ramaphosa, on 2 occasions so far, there is always an Air Force or a show of force where our Air Force comes in and fly over the inauguration to show our military capabilities. In all Ramaphosa's inauguration events so far, you have had at least 2 South African Airways jets, bolstering the aircraft on display. Because without those jets, which have nothing to do with the Air Force, it would look really poor. In the last inauguration in June 2024, there were 2 Gripen fighters, and those were the only ones available. There were 3 Hawk fighters in that display. There was 1 Oryx, and there was no Roy Falk. So you have in public display really a demonstration of the inefficiency and the depths to which our Air Force has plunged. And just for the fun of it, and I didn't include this in the story, in the writing of the story, I called one of the senior government officials, who shall remain nameless, and said, this is a person who exactly knows what was happening on that day and has been officially briefed, knows exactly what equipment was available and not. I asked him or her, I'm trying to not divulge his or her name. I said, please tell me, what helicopters did the Air Force have on that day in the DRC? He was so angry at that question that I'm obviously not going to answer that, and ended the call. This is a person to whom the force reports.
Well, thank you for revealing that. Of course, taking us a little bit more behind the story there is Sikonathi. Ending off, And this is my final question, and you don't have to say too much because there's actually not an awful lot to say. But the recent budget tabled by our finance minister only really adds 400 million rand to the mix for the SANDF going ahead for the next financial year. That's not an awful lot when the concern has been in the main for the longest time, putting everything else aside, that the budget for the SANDF hasn't been big enough to ensure that all these planes that are currently grounded don't accumulate rust.
Graeme, please add 5 billion rand to that figure, and that 5 billion rand was specifically ring-fenced to help with the peacekeeping operations, such as the one in the DRC. Now that the SADC has decided to withdraw in defeat, let's be frank about this. South Africa and SADC have been totally humiliated and defeated in the DRC by the M23 and Rwanda. This is Tanzania, South Africa. I can't remember the other national force that's there. Now that mission, at least the SADC mandated one, is coming to an end, much of that 5 billion rand will not be available, and the 400 million rands that has been allocated as an additional to the military's budget is only about 0.43% growth in a world where inflation is about 4% and historically has been about 5%, and there have been budget cuts since at least 2005. So equipment has been lying idle over the past 15 to 20 years because there's not been sufficient funding for it, and now it's been eroded by inflation and even so the situation is not getting any better. South Africa has to make a decision. Do we or do we not want to have armed forces, and then act accordingly?
That's the main question I sort of think we're left with. And just to point out, that third country, Sikonathi, was Malawi, of course.
Malawi,
as part of
Malawi, South Africa.
Sure.
They were all defeated by a country the size of the Gauteng province. That's Rwanda. I know, I have been there. Rwanda is the size of Gauteng or the Kruger National Park in terms of land size. The population, Rwanda is about 12 million people, and they have defeated South Africa on the eastern side of the DRC. And as we speak now, Graeme, this needs to be really highlighted. South Africa's armed forces, the contingent in the DRC, about 1,000 people, have been held prisoner of war, surrounded by the M23 and Rwanda at Goma Airport, where their base is, and at Sake. At Sake, they have been totally disarmed. In Goma, where a lot of the casualties happened, they have only been allowed to keep small weapons to shoot at intruders who come into the airport to steal stuff. So we've been totally humiliated and defeated in the DRC by the M23 and Rwanda, and primarily because South Africa's Air Force was not available to help repel any attacks.
Well, perhaps all of this will lead to some sort of seminal moment for our current government of national unity, Sikonathi. I really do appreciate you chatting to us. A real sad state of the South African Air Force, and I'm looking forward very much to you unpacking the state of the South African Navy as well as the SANDF troops, our army battalions on the ground. Thank you so much for joining us here on The Lead on News 24.
You're welcome. Thank you for the opportunity.
To our trending topic now, the local aviation community has been paying tribute to veteran pilot James O'Connell, who was killed in a crash at a Saldanha Bay air show over the weekend. That was the moment caught on camera that O'Connell's Impala Mk1 aircraft suddenly plunged, leaving hundreds of spectators in disbelief. Highly skilled and respected, with more than 36 years' experience, O'Connell was the chief instructor at the Test Flying Academy of South Africa and was undertaking a routine air display before the aircraft suddenly took a deep dive. West Coast Airshow organisers say it was fairly rare to see the Impala in flight. Some online say O'Connell was a hero who purposefully steered the plane away from the crowd. Meanwhile, the South African Civil Aviation Authority confirms it'll publish the findings of its preliminary probe into this incident later next month. News 24 will bring you that story then. And finally, it's official. A little birdie's told us that golfing legend Tiger Woods is now dating a Trump. Woods tweeted on X that he's now romantically involved with the US president's former daughter-in-law, Vanessa Trump. She's Donald Trump Jr.'s ex-wife of 13 years, with whom they had 5 children together. This post follows weeks of tabloid rumors about the couple, as Woods is known for remaining especially private in more recent years. Woods even once named his luxury yacht Privacy. So Woods and Trump are now calling on the public to let them be. In 2009, a sex scandal imploded Woods' marriage to Elin Nordegren, the mother of his 2 children. Be sure to monitor News24.com's arts and entertainment section for any updates there. From the sad state of our Air Force to the Tiger-Trump tie-in. That's been our show, and we hope you've enjoyed it. For your comments and voice notes, you can mail the lead at 24.com, with editions dropping Monday to Thursday at 7 at night. My name's Graeme Raubenheimer, and so long as there's news, we'll have the lead.